are united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
We are doing this in our open democracies. Discussion is all open and loud, and I'm not for that.
What is European Union? What is freedom? How we learn together.
The obvious question is, what is the EU doing? What is our plan?
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking around. How are we doing? Doing well? Give me a thumbs up. All right. Thanks for being with me here. I appreciate that. I'm Sarah Wheaton, your MC for the special 10th Healthcare Summit. I'm also Politico's Food and Agriculture editor and EU Confidential podcast host. Before we kick off this second half of the day, I'd like to thank the leading partners, AstraZeneca, Haleon, MedTech Europe, and Sanofi, and the presenting partners, FPA, Johnson & Johnson, Lilly, and Sandoz. Thanks again to you. So this afternoon, we're taking a big picture look beyond Europe from global aid to trade and climate change. I'm gonna bring my co-MC, Helen Collis, health editor of Politico, up to tell us a little bit more.
Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Helen. We're going to scoot. There we go. What's on tap for today?
So we're really turning to a more international theme this afternoon, and I'm really excited. First of all, we'll be having a chat with some reporters that we used to work with, at least one of them in Brussels, some reporters in the US to bring us up to speed on what's been happening in the United States with regards to healthcare policy, and particularly elements that are really having an impact and making waves in Europe today. So this is the real kind of geopolitical discussion that we've been having, namely around Donald Trump's tariff threats for industry, for the pharmaceutical sector. The medical devices sector is already undergoing these tariffs, and the push for industry to invest more in manufacturing in the US, while also threatening to cut drug prices. We'll be looking at the global health funding crisis, also as a result of health policy changes in the US. And we'll finish for the day with what some might argue is the most important topic of the day, which is climate change and the health threats that we're now all facing from that.
Okay, sounds really good, Helen. And now I'm actually going to get maybe a little bit emotional with this next thing, because when I first started as a health reporter at Politico in 2017, Carmen Pon showed me the ropes. Helen, Carmen, and I we're working together. And now we're getting the band back together, even though Carmen is sitting in my old seat on the health team at Politico headquarters in Washington, D.C. So we'll hand it over to Carmen, as well as to our other stateside colleague, Lauren Gardner, for this Newsflash Transatlantic Health Check with Helen leading.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. So I'd like to welcome now the two reporters that we just mentioned in our Washington, D.C. office for Politico there to join us online and to bring us up to speed on some of the latest developments affecting the pharmaceutical sector and global health policy. I'm very happy to welcome Lauren Gardner, who covers the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, drug pricing, Medicare, and vaccines for Politico in Washington, and also Carmen Pon, who for some of you in the room may be a familiar face and recognize her from her years working in Brussels on health policy with us here, and who now covers global health policy from the Washington, D.C. office. Thank you both for joining us, and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Lauren, I'd like to start with you first, please. There's been a lot happening in the US that has directly impacted and made waves in Europe since Donald Trump took office last year. Most notably, the threats of pharma tariffs, the first that we would experience for 30 years, the threats of major drug pricing reforms in the shape of the most favored nation drug pricing schedule, which would see adopting the lowest price from a basket of similar countries. Lauren, can you bring us up to speed on both of these elements, please? Where do things currently stand on the tariffs and the drug pricing reforms?
Yeah, great question. Both topics have been huge here in the US for the last several months, and we're kind of in a holding pattern. With respect to the tariffs, the White House several weeks ago signaled, we're going to hold back on these 100% tariffs that they had threatened because they were getting some pharma companies to individually come to the table to negotiate with them on most favorite, in particular, most favored nations pricing. I believe it was over the summer. Time has stood still. The president sent letters to the CEOs of 17 major pharma companies, essentially saying, negotiate with us to establish most favored nations pricing on on your drugs, or else we're going to make you feel some pain. And that tactic appears to have worked. The White House has rolled out, I believe, about 5 deals so far, and they're kind of coming out at a trickle. They're on average, there's been about one a week for the last 5 to 6 weeks. So we're expecting to see more of those as time goes on, since he hasn't run through the entire list of companies to which he sent letters earlier this year. But until we see more of those deals come through, it appears that the tariff threat is on ice, at least for now.
I see. And are we expecting, is there any sort of time limit? I mean, you kind of mentioned you've had about one a week. Is there any kind of time limit that's been indicated by the White House for these deals to be made?
No, you're going to be as surprised as the rest of us. My understanding is that there are still active negotiations going on with some of the companies that haven't announced deals yet with the White House.
I see. And what about the Medicare drug pricing reforms that came into effect under the Biden administration? Is that still in motion under Trump? And where are we currently?
Yes, so that is an aspect to the entire drug pricing debate here in the U.S. that the administration technically has to follow through on because it's written into law. All of this other stuff going on with tariffs and most favored nations is just President Trump's personal priority that isn't being directed by anyone other than himself. But with respect to the Medicare negotiations, and Medicare being the US's insurance program generally for people 65 and older, and some other populations, that is still moving forward. By the end of the month, it's expected that the administration will announce the maximum fair price, is what we call it, that's been negotiated with the companies in question for this round for 15 drugs, which includes, it actually includes 3 of the branded drugs, but it includes semaglutide, the GLP-1, commonly known as Ozempic, Wegovy, that Novo Nordisk's products are included in this most current round. So that's definitely one that a lot of people are paying attention to, since so many people in the United States are interested in taking those drugs. So we're waiting to see what the product of those negotiations will be. And while it's specific to Medicare beneficiaries, the general sense in the US is that as Medicare goes, other private insurers tend to follow. So the hope is that there is a knock-on effect further down the line as other insurance companies see what Medicare is paying, and then hopefully lower prices for other consumers.
Wow, so it could have quite a big impact then across the states. And I understand it's 15 drugs this year, but that's going to be expanded, right, as the years go on. More drugs will be added.
Yeah, it gradually ratchets up over time.
So eventually it should cover most products of the high-value products that are used under Medicare.
Exactly.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Lauren, for that update. Carmen, I'd like to come to you and to find out from your perspective what's going on in the global health field. It's lovely to see you again. We both started at POLITICO together 10 years ago, so it's nice to be reunited again on healthcare. You are covering the global health market, so I'm wondering if you can tell us, especially since the US massively cut its funding to US aid and is withdrawing from the World Health Organization, what's the latest position of the US towards global health?
Hi, Helen. It's great to be there, even though virtually. Sorry, it's early morning here, and my kid hasn't gone to daycare, so he
Hello.
decided to make an appearance. Give me just one.
He's fine. Don't worry.
Oh, this is like the pandemic all over again.
It's just like being in 2020 all again.
I was, I was afraid this would happen. It's like, what do you fear the most? So, as you said, there have been this massive and sudden cuts in global health funding from the US, which has typically been the biggest global health funder in the world. Um, I would start with some good news, I guess, for many people is that the State Department said 2 days ago that they are planning to make a pledge to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. As many people might know, the replenishment event is happening this Friday in South Africa. We still don't know how much the US plans to pledge. We do not know if it's going to be as generous as it's been in the past. In 2024, I think it was funding the Global Fund at the tune of $1.6 billion. But we should probably find out by Friday. And why this stands out is that it would probably be the only sort of like global health entity that the Trump administration would continue to fund. They have announced that they do not want to fund Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. And obviously, as you said, the WHO withdrawal is ongoing and they have already cut all the funding. So this would be, for many people, sort of like the light in the dark, but we have to see also exactly how much money that would be. The State Department also announced this week that they're working with the Global Fund and with Gilead to roll out lenacapavir, which is this twice-a-year drug that is almost 100% effective at preventing HIV in people at risk. They are starting with 2 countries, Eswatini and Zambia, and they're planning to roll it out to more countries over time to reach 2 million people in the next 3 years. They did make clear that they do not plan to fund doses for South Africa, which the State Department officials said has money of its own to fund those doses. And all of this comes in the context of the Trump administration America First global health policy, which they launched in September. And this policy really focuses on working directly with the governments of the countries that benefit from US support and leaving out NGOs and other organizations that the Trump administration has been very critical of. And they have said that a lot of the money was going to support these organizations' overhead instead of actually going to the people on the ground that are impacted. That has been contested here, but obviously what is happening is that it seems to be a big shift towards sort of like government to government cooperation. The State Department is working really hard to get most of the countries it supports on this sort of like global health compact, which is basically bilateral agreements where they say, what benchmarks need to be met by when. And in some cases, they do want to have sunset dates for US funding for those countries, or at least for some areas of health in those countries that the US supports. What has been sort of like creating controversy here over the past few days is that some leaks show that this agreement demand countries that would get US global health funding under this compact to share pathogen data with the US. They wouldn't necessarily get back the same benefits that are being negotiated under the pandemic agreement. It would just be just the US support. But the US would want to have access to pathogen sharing and to data and to know very fast if there's an outbreak in a specific country. There has been also recently a report that the US wants access to those countries' health data systems to be able to check if the benchmarks are really being met. And that those agreements would be for 25 years. So the US would have access for 25 years to some of those countries' health data systems. We do not know yet if countries will accept that. And the State Department hasn't confirmed that yet, to my knowledge. But I think this gives you an idea of where things are going. I was talking to Republicans in Congress a few months ago, and basically, many of them do not think that the US has sort of like gotten this soft power that many said it gets from global health funding. And it definitely seems to be a push towards a very clear, much more transactional relationship with very clear benchmarks where basically it says, what exactly does the US get out of this global health funding and how can we benefit from it? And then, if they think it's a good deal, they being the Trump administration, then they would continue funding some of these countries.
Thank you so much, Carmen. That's a really good summary of where things stand today. Some nuggets of positive news potentially, but also those bilateral deals with countries to really potentially get their pathogen data without buying into the pandemic deal, and getting the sort of the vaccines and drugs that are made from that data in return is an interesting development. That's all we've got time for. We've run over time, so thank you so much for joining us, both of you. We'll have shortly another panel on the global health situation, so I shall leave it there. Thank you.